In the hush before dawn, while the Bosphorus still wore its ink-blue veil, a 1,000-year-old city held its breath. Constantinople, the fabled queen of cities, its minarets, recent Ottoman dreams, ancient domes, markets, monasteries, workshops, and winding lanes awaiting the first gold of sunrise. And before her walls, from Rumeli Hisarü to the Golden Horn, stretched a sea of Sultan Mehmed II's armies, red and black tents pricked with spearheads, the cold gleam of cast bronze cannon, janissaries aligned like a drawn bowstring, Akıncı scouts melting in and out of the dark, drummers beating a heart that foretold a storm. Behind the ramparts stood the Theodosian walls, triple lines of stone and memory, each block listening to time itself, while within, from Blachernae to Hagia Sophia, bells trembled, incense lifted, and Emperor Constantine IV, stern yet composed, measured his fate with every step, whispering, "My city, my destiny. If these walls fall, the lines of history themselves will shift." Across the field, the young conqueror, Mehmed the Fatih, bore eyes honed like steel, a mind versed in Euclid's borders, and Archimedes' levers tutored in Arabic astronomy and Latin histories, and a heart fixed on an old core, Anic and prophetic echo, carried by Ottoman storytellers, that Constantinople would one day belong to a prince of resolve. He had studied failed sieges past, their hunger and miscalculation, and resolved to alter the arithmetic. Supply lines secured across Thrace, pontoon bridges ready for the Horn, siege towers, fascines, scaling ladders, mines and countermines mapped in advance. And he commissioned Urban's great cast bronze gun, Basilica, whose thunder sent gulls skittering and children clutching at mothers, asking why the sky itself now roared. This is not merely a tale of war, but of patience, strategy, and faith. A chain boomed across the Golden Horn. Byzantine and Genoese hands had drawn it tight to choke the city. Water veins. Yet Mehmed thought, if the river is closed, carry the river over the hills. So beneath a cloud-masked moon came hundreds of greased log rollers, oxen straining sailors shouting timbers screeching. Entire galleys were hauled across Galata's ridges like improbable beasts of wood. At dawn, Byzantine sentries rubbed stinging eyes and saw a miracle, or a calamity, Ottoman ships within the Horn. The chain outflanked by audacity, arrows and culverin shot, now raining from water as well as land. Within the councils of the besieged, doubt frayed the edges. Negotiate terms, send to Rome. Wait for Venice. Yet the winds were slow, and Mediterranean promises slower. A Venetian squadron hovered far away, counting risks. The Pope's envoy spoke of union, but men remembered to 1204, when Latin crusaders tore the city's soul. And under chapels and cloisters, the old grievances between Greek and Latin breathed on. Still, for every soldier atop the ramparts, there was only one language: survival. Days bled into nights. Bombardment hammered the Lycus Valley. Mantlets crawled forward. Siege towers lurched like blind giants. Sappers gnawed tunnels beneath the earth, propping roofs with green wood that smoldered and smoked when the Byzantines set fires above. Counterminers met them by candlelight, tasting clay, reading enemy breath through damp soil. Sometimes men fought in burrows so narrow that the scream of iron and the gasp of lungs set the air itself trembling. Above, on the parapets, Giustiniani Longo, steel-ribbed, scarred, relentless, stood shoulder to shoulder with Constantine, plugging each breach as cannon opened 1,000 small mouths in venerable stone. And mortar answered with sacks of earth, wicker, and timber, an unending argument between time and will. Messengers sprinted stairwells with bowls of nails for tireless carpenters, with bowls of olives for tireless archers, with bowls of water for those whose lips had forgotten softness. In the quarters of the faithful on both sides, prayers rose like countervailing tides. In monasteries, the Akathist hymn washed stone with sorrowed hope. In Ottoman tents, murmur and recitation swayed beneath lamplight. Dervishes spun or whispered litanies. And in Mehmed's pavilion, scholars and gunners mapped the next day's geometry. An eclipse, an omen to some, cast a bruised shadow across the siege and multiplied tales in both camps. But omens bend to logistics, and the ledger of bread timber powder and nerve is the truest scripture of war. Will the city fall? The narrator asks, and draws us backward, Constantine the Great laying out imperial avenues. Justinian raising a Hagia Sophia's vast dome, whose harmonies lifted the world's breath. Michael Sellos writing merchants, weighing silk armorers, tapping helms. Saints argued over in councils. Then the Crusader sack of 1204 that pierced the city heart, for when you burn a city's soul, the healing counts by centuries. The empire reeled, narrowed, and clung to this shore like a stubborn flame in wind. Now Mehmed S. drums speak of more than a sultan's desire. They rattle with the gunpowder revolution, the rerouting of trade and tribute, the hinge of continents creaking toward a new alignment. Far out at sea, Portuguese caravels chart the monsoon, while here at the Straits, a different compass is being set. Caravans in Anatolia pause in dust, listening for news that will shift the prices of pepper, silk, and fur. Night after night, assaults flared, probing attacks, feints, scaling rushes turned back by boiling pitch and crossbow storms. A rain burst, flooded trenches collapsed, a tunnel doused watchfires. Craftsmen in both camps mended wheels, spliced rope, recast shot. A stray spark took a powder cart and sent a fan of fire across a ditch. Physicians worked by lamplight with vinegar and prayer. A child in the city traded figs for a nail to tug from a plank for his mother-ass cooking stove. A janissary polished the hinge of his shield until he could see the crescent flare in it. Small economies tipped the great economy of fate. The final day came like a breath held too long. 29 May 1453, pale blue before sunrise. Mehmed loosed the last assault in 3 rolling waves. Bashi bazooks to tire defenders and mark weak points, the disciplined Anatolian infantry to press them thin. And then the Janissaries, imperial household troops, whose cadence drew a river into a straight line. St. Romanus Gate buckled under relentless metal. A banner toppled and was snatched back in bloody hands. Giustiniani took a grave wound and faltered toward the inner way. In that falter, Constantine saw the invisible load-bearing arch of morale begin to crack. He kissed the cross at his lips. Purple boots spattered armor dulled by weeks of dust, and charged one last time. The city is lost, but not my honor. And in that run, entire centuries moved. Greek laments, Roman eagles, Anatolian winds, a swirl of cloaks, bucklers, and bone-tired men. When the dust settled, the Emperor S. body was never surely found. Legends say it lay beneath the walls among his own, as if he chose to become another stone in the city's foundation. Toward Hagia Sophia surged women and children, priests and the terrified. Sanctuary, perhaps? But fate had tightened its script. Janissaries reached the doors. Somewhere an icon lamp guttered out. Somewhere a man pressed his brow to cool marble and breathed a last untroubled breath. Conquest, for all its trumpets, travels in the quiet footsteps of endings. Mehmed entered through the gate of Carisius not merely as conqueror, but as an architect of destiny. On Hagia Sophia's floor, he lifted earth to his head, an emblem of humility, and said, "Let the city live." Governors were appointed, commanders leashed from pillage, streets counted and quartered. Craftsmen were summoned from Anatolia and Rumelia. Families, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, were resettled by Surgan to repopulate empty wards. Markets reopened under the eye of the Mutasim. Endowments, waqfs, repaired fountains, ovens, bridges, a new complex. Fatis rose with madrises, hospital, hospice, and kitchens. Topkapi took root on the Saraburnu like a prow. Scribes copied law. Muezzins learned the wind. Greek and Armenian merchants recalculated the price of hope. A policy of the millets took shape, imperfect yet pragmatic. Communities permitted worship judges, allowed custom, the crown guarding its supremacy while trading strictness for continuity. Some called it merely politics turned over. History hears more. A resetting of science and art roots and reckonings. Because the Strait now wrote tariffs in 2 alphabets and 3 scripts, and caravans again had a destination that made sense of their dust. Not all grief was gathered in the first days. A city's sorrow seeps for years. For Byzantines, this was not only a capital, but a sanctuary of soul. Hymns and mosaics, law and learning. A universe now reframed under a new sovereign grammar. For the Ottomans, this was not a prize alone, but a responsibility to cradle law to foster learning, to pour skill into stone and garden. Calligraphers traced Quranic arches where Greek had once whispered theology. Architects studied the old brick courses of Hagia Sophia and learned proportions they would later echo in bright stone. Builders relaid aqueducts and rebuilt harbors. Guilds set rules. A young apprentice learned to burnish a scimitar's curve until it sang. A Greek sailor signed on to an Ottoman corvette and learned new curses for old winds. An Armenian stonecutter squared blocks for a gate that would stand long enough for his grandchildren to forget his name, but not his handiwork. Walk Istanbul as lanes today, and 1453 still brushes your sleeve. A bizarre cornice where Latin letters linger under Ottoman paint. A hammam wall where Byzantine brick converses with Iznik tile. A stretch of sea where chains once slept and ships once climbed hills like goats. Stand on the land walls and feel that peculiar silence cities keep when they have been ended and begun in the same hour. Look to the bridges strung like an oud across the Bosphorus, strings on which East and West pluck their daily song, improvising commerce and culture anew. The lesson broadens as the camera of memory cranes high. Cities are not born of walls and gates alone. They are raised by intent, craft, and forbearance. Power without wisdom is powder, brilliant then consuming. Mehmed is audacity, and Constantine, yet valor, are 2 hard edges of the same human spirit, one that builds by daring, one that stands by dignity. Empire is a road that changes the traveler as much as the land, and 29th of May, 1453, so often taught as a conclusion, reads truer as an overture, gunpowder's base, faith's treble, logistics' steady drum. Because when you hear the cannon at your own walls, doubt, fear, inertia, remember that a chain need not be broken. Sometimes you lift it over the hills and give the river a new path, for history inks its pages with those who steady courage before the city falls, and then rise breathless and resolved as the first architects when it stands anew.